inviting me to be on this panel of these webinars that you have going. I don't personally know the other presenters, but I've kind of stalked out their pages in a little bit. And it sounds like they're just powerhouse women that are experts in their business. So I feel humbled and appreciative to be on your list to do this. And really the main thing I've been looking at in business in general, it's so crucial. And then kind of you take down to the current situation that we're in is leadership. And it's something that when we're in high stress, it can kind of go out the window, especially when you're the leader. You're like, everything's hitting the fan right now. I don't have time to try to be, what people call the soft skills in running my business. However, I think that calling a lot of the leadership practices soft skills is a little bit of a misnomer because it really directly affects your bottom line and affects the entire productivity and profitability of your business. And so today I wanted to jump into kind of a leadership 101, talk through a few of leadership best practices that I teach and guide all of my clients through, and talk about how we can really specifically apply them with what's going on right now. So I'll start with, just the fact that leadership best practices don't change depending on the situation. They're best practices, but they're kind of fundamental behaviors that you need to go back and lean on when you're running your business and running a team. But when we're going through something we're going through right now, you just want to apply them more intentionally. You might see in certain circumstances, you kind of apply them in a different way. So I'll kind of dive in. I've got 3 that I wanted to go through in the time that we have today. And the first one, I'll admit that I kind of got a little bit of sweaty palms, that I was like, oh, is this really one to include? Because the rule is don't be too serious. And I got kind of that hesitation, that sweaty palm in including don't be too serious in a leadership rule with everything we're going through right now, because what we're going through is serious. People are losing their income. People's businesses are struggling or having to shift. People are being ill. People are dying. People have family members that are ill and dying. So this is really, really serious, what we're going through. So how would we apply a leadership rule of don't be too serious when things are really freaking serious? But it's a fundamental rule. And what better time to kind of run it through the test and see if it really applies, and if it is such an important leadership rule, which I found it is, even when things are going the way they are right now. So to be clear, when I say don't be too serious, it doesn't mean don't think that things are important. It doesn't mean importance goes out the window. It doesn't mean that you treat things flippantly. Things can be urgent. They can have high priority. You can even have areas that have little room for error. All of those things can be true, and you cannot be too serious about it. And the principle behind it, the main goal behind it, is to take serious action over having a serious attitude. Value the action over the attitude. And I first got this, and I first started implementing this in my businesses, listening to spiritual leader Ram Dass. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with Ram Dass, but I was listening to one of his talks like from back in the 70s. I wasn't even alive yet. But in this talk, he was talking about a charity that he ran, and they would have a rule that if anybody would sit at the board, and this charity, like many, dealt in very serious issues, but they had a rule that if anybody would be at the boardroom table and, kind of do the this is serious type attitude, they would have to put on these really ridiculous, like kind of springy, googly glasses. And so they would, if somebody demanded that something was serious, they would have to then look ridiculous. And the principle was the same as what I'm saying now, and what I've applied in my business is so many people think that by having a serious attitude, they kind of mentally check this box that they've done their part. I treated it seriously, I did my part, and they kind of check out. And that's not what you want to do as a leader, and that's not what you want to encourage your team to do. You want to value serious action over serious attitude. And the other part of it is happy people, people that are finding joy in the work that they're doing, are more profitable. They're more effective. And so you can be fun, you can have some play involved, and you can take serious action. And that's where the value lies. So the underlying purpose of this is, as the leader, lead with behaviors over your demeanor and attitude, and value having real results and having that serious action happen over people just kind of checking the box by having the proper demeanor about something. Next one is to commit yourself to constant learning. As a leader, if you're in this webinar series, I'm probably kind of preaching to the choir, because you're a little bit on board. You're here to learn something, get new information, and apply it into your business. But that also applies in how you lead your team. So diving in a little bit further, when you are a leader who commits yourself to constant learning, it means you intentionally seek out information regularly to improve yourself, both in your business subject matter and in your skills as a leader. I really highly recommend that leaders have a weekly goal. Have a book you want to read, a webinar you want to take, a podcast that you make sure and listen to every day, something that improves your skills as a leader and within your industry. You've never arrived. A leader that thinks that they've arrived has some huge blind spots that you're definitely missing out on. And so commit yourself to learning, commit yourself to pulling outside information on a regular basis that is going to help improve you and help improve the way you serve your team and lead your team. Have a willingness to discover better methods, both externally from these kind of courses and webinars, and internally from the individuals that you lead. Be willing to discover better methods of doing things, different ways of approaching issues and tasks that can just improve the efficacy of your team and yourself, your organization as a whole. You know, right now, with everything we're going through with this crisis, being able to problem solve, being willing to not just draw lines in the sand of my way or the highway, being willing to gather information from the outside, from what other businesses are doing, from ideas that your team have. This is going to be critical in keeping the trust of your team, that you have this mutual trust with them, that their innovation, their ideas are important to you and your organization, and also just their trust in you to keep the ship moving. Ship, I said that with a P at the end. It's really going to be critical that you show your team as a leader that you encourage and you want to practice constantly learning and being willing to bring in new information. So in putting this to practice, like I said, challenge yourself to do one thing every week. Stop yourself. If you have your team coming to you saying, what if we tried this? Or, hey, this isn't working, or we're not even allowed under government regulations right now to do X, Y, or Z. When you have your team bringing you solutions, stop yourself if your knee-jerk reaction is to say, that won't work or there's no way. I hear so many leaders kind of have these lines in the sand that aren't really based in fact or experience. They just kind of have this definition in their mind of this is how we've always done things. Right now, how we've always done things go out the window. It's kind of irrelevant. Your business needs you to be innovative. It needs you to encourage your team to be innovative. And you need to show as a leader that you're willing to take those things in. So just kind of have those be naughty words in your mind that you're not going to say, no, that won't work. There's no way. Especially if you have your team coming to you with solutions, kind of a pro tip on this is to say, tell me more. Even if you think it won't work, even if you think that there's no way you could implement it by regulation or by cost, or for any reason as the leader of this team or organization, you think that you couldn't do a thing, put it to the team members that present it to you. Or even if it's your idea or an outside idea, take it to your team and say, hey, we have this idea. I'm not really sure how it might work. What do you think? How are ways that we could overcome our own objections? How are ways that we can make it cost effective? Get them problem solving with you. I want to say one thing that I noticed with this crisis is I looked back through my messages and texts and emails, and on March 10th, I can't even count how many businesses said to me, there's no way we can go remote. Our industry won't allow it. Our efficacy won't allow it. Technology alone will make it way too hard. We have to have our people in person in the building. And every single one of those businesses are successfully telecommuting today. So things can be done, but you have to be willing to learn. You have to be willing to take that information in and apply it to your situation and be open to it. And that shows your team, it builds trust with your team. They feel like you value their information. They feel like you value their ideas and their innovation. And it builds trust with them that you are going to do everything it takes to keep this business successful and keep them employed right now during this time. The last one, I saved the third tip for last because it's really the hardest and there's the most to talk about with this, and it's making space for discomfort. This is an absolutely critical leadership attribute, no matter what industry you're in, no matter what size of team you're leading. There's nobody that falls outside of this rule that as a leader, you have to be willing to make space for discomfort. And when I mean that, it's being willing to have the hard talks, being willing, whether it's with customers or your employees that you lead, you need to be willing to honor the boundaries that you've set within your organization, honor people's personal boundaries, and have those hard conversations if something's not working. You need to have the hard conversations the first time. It's not, oh, I hope it won't happen again. You teach people how to treat you. And this goes in your personal life as well. But especially as a leader of an organization, every single action or inaction is teaching people how to behave and what behaviors are appropriate. Is something wrong? Oh, sorry, Victoria. I thought you needed something.
Hi. Sorry. Repeat that for me, please.
I'm sorry?
Oh, what were you saying? You called me.
I thought something was wrong. I thought I couldn't hear you. So we're good.
Oh, no. It's okay.
I'll keep going. So I was talking about making space for discomfort, and every single action or inaction being something that you're teaching people the appropriate way to act within your organization. What's acceptable, what doesn't work. So if you're not willing to have these hard conversations, make space within yourself to be uncomfortable, then things are going to go downhill pretty quickly. Problems will not just disappear. Unfortunately, I wish they would, but they just don't. So when it comes down to this, it's important to remember that the most respected leaders, the people that, if you look back with the leaders that you've had in the history of your career, they're not the people pleasers. They're not the ones that just tell you yes to everything. They're the people that you've earned trust, mutual trust with, that you know where they stand, you know that they'll stand up for boundaries, and you know that they'll do so as your advocate. Whether it's for or against a certain thing that you're doing, you can always trust where they're coming from. Those are the best leaders that you look back on. And you want to be that leader. So you have to be willing to have the hard, uncomfortable conversations and reestablish those boundaries. It promotes predictability. And these are the two most important things, especially with what's going on right now. You being willing to have that discomfort, have those conversations. You're promoting predictability, which is something that we're lacking right now. We don't know from one day or the next. Your team doesn't know from one day to the next what on earth is going on, what's going to happen. if they know what to expect from you and how you're going to react to certain situations, certain boundaries, you're giving them a level of predictability that they don't have anywhere else in the world. And that's really going to build loyalty. The other thing, similarly, is it just gives an overall sense of security for your team. They know this person, the leader, is going to do what it takes to make sure things stay at the best level of normal. They're not going to let things slide that don't need to be sliding right now. We know that they'll give us that sense of security. Again, something that people just don't have a lot of right now. And your team is really going to appreciate getting it from you as the leader. I got a little off on my notes. I just wanted to kind of talk about balance with that making space for discomfort and having the hard talks with people, whether it's setting boundaries with customers. I want to say I've probably had the same level of hard conversations, those uncomfortable conversations with customers as I have with my team. So even if you're a solopreneur, this definitely still applies to you. And and all those same rules apply. If your customers know that, hey, her business is in a place that she's not going to let me push the lines. She's still going to hold me accountable. She's still going to lead me in my business in the same way as she would any other day. You're still creating that predictability and sense of security that your customers are more comfortable with you with. And so it doesn't only apply to employees, it really applies to customers too. So I want to talk about getting that balance of those uncomfortable conversations and the two poles that aren't in balance that we tend to lean further towards. So the first place that I see a lot of leaders go, and a lot of people go when they're needing to have these hard conversations with their team or their customers, is they kind of get cold to it. This feels really uncomfortable. I don't like this talk. I don't like the way I feel having this talk. I'm just going to block out the emotion and get cold. While it will deliver the information and you will feel better because you won't feel so emotional about it, the person on the other side will not feel okay about it. If you're otherwise a warm relationship, they know what to predict from you, they know your demeanor, and suddenly all emotion and connection is shut off when you need to address something hard, you're going to lose a huge amount of trust in that relationship. Yeah, you'll feel better about it, but now you've just undermined the trust in the relationship, and that wasn't worth it. That's not a worthy exchange. If things get hard and you go cold in the future, that person isn't going to feel safe to be open to you, even during good times. You're going to inhibit innovation with your customer relationship. You're going to inhibit future growth because they feel like, oh, okay, I can trust them. I can be open unless things get hard, unless they don't like what I have to say or do. And then they're going to treat me differently. And you'll really cut off a really valuable part of that relationship. So it's worth it to go ahead and feel the hard feelings yourself, kind of physically make an energetic space for it versus getting cold and cutting off future trust. Because we all know that once, any kind of trust, once some of it's lost, it's really hard to gain back. The other spectrum of it is avoidance. And it's, I don't want to feel this way. I don't want to have this hard talk. I'm just going to hope it goes away. It won't. Like I said at the beginning, we teach people what things work, what behaviors are acceptable, where boundaries lie. If you don't respect your own boundaries that you've set, you're lost. They're gone, and it's harder to put them back in place once you've let them slide. So avoidance kind of can have a spectrum as well. Sometimes it just looks like kind of a passive email. Within an organization, with a team, the most common thing I see, and I'm going to admit I've done it, we've all done it, is that passive email that tells the whole team, hey, everyone, just a reminder, these are the rules. For example, just a reminder, the workday starts at 9 a.m., not 9:15. Make sure everybody's on time. You're only addressing one person, but you choose to be more passive, not have to deal with that one-on-one uncomfortable conversation. So you shoot it out to everybody. That's really not effective. I know we all want to do that and we just can avoid that hard conversation. But by doing that passive kind of addressing, the person who's violating the rule probably isn't going to pick up the message. Everybody knows the workday starts at 9 a.m. This isn't new information. If they're already choosing to violate the rule, you are not sending a clear message to them. You are sending a message to the rest of your team that you're not planning on addressing this one-on-one and you're losing some trust there. And it makes them feel like, why is she coming at me? I follow this rule all the time. So that passive group email or any other passive way of kind of trying to hint at a boundary is not going to work. Boundaries need to be established very clearly, very concisely. And if they've been broken, it has to be done with a direct conversation that just tends to feel kind of uncomfortable. Another thing would be, another way people avoid is just literally not addressing it all and hoping some kind of social pressure or some kind of magical thing is just going to change and that person will fall back in line. And that's just not how human behavior works. Human behavior works out of habit. And if you've allowed a new habit to start and you haven't stopped it, there isn't any other thing that's going to make it unwind. So that's kind of like basic psychology 101 in human behavior, letting people break boundaries, including customers, especially customers, letting them break your boundaries and then hoping they just stop and start respecting it again won't ever work. You have to be direct. And I love using the word boundaries. Say, hey, we kind of established this at the beginning of our relationship. These are boundaries I have in place that are really important for me to serve you best and have the most efficient business myself. We really need to get back on track with that. Being direct, using the word boundaries is really effective, and then you can move on. So in that balance, kind of wrapping up this uncomfortable conversation about uncomfortable conversations, you just want to try to balance being compassionate. You don't want to be cold. You don't want to cut off the other person's emotions. You don't want to cut off your own emotions. Be compassionate, but have unwavering boundaries. And I shouldn't have even used the word but. I should say be compassionate and have unwavering boundaries, because those are not opposites. They're not mutually exclusive. You can definitely hold both of those things at the same time. And I would say they even are reliant on each other. So I kind of wanted to go into, I have just a couple quick, just real life examples that my clients have come across that I want to just kind of give an example of how these situations can arise in your business and how to apply each of these kind of leadership rules within it. So the first one, I'm going to line out every single rule, exactly how it applies. And the second one, we're going to kind of mix it up a little bit. So the first one I have is you have a brick and mortar business, your storefront is opening back up either to the public or even just having office employees come in after having to be closed due to the COVID issues. It's a uniquely delicate time for everyone. As a leader, you have your own ideas, you have expectations, you have thoughts, excitements, and fears about how your business is going to reopen, right? And you have a team that's coming in and going to be part of that reopening too. So with the first one on don't be too serious, I'm going to tell you to enter into your new practices. If you have, new rules, new practices that you have to implement due to opening and COVID issues, you can do that delicately and with intention, but you don't have to have just like this stoic, serious face about it. Part of your face may be covered by a mask the whole time, but a lot reads through your eyes. You can do this and take on this really serious issue, and you can have fun. You can laugh. You don't need to reopen your business, reinvite your team and your customers back in with just like this really crazy intensity. People need lightness right now. People need joy. They need to be happy. They need to have fun. So you can do this and take care of sanitation practices and distancing practices, and you can take all of those things very earnestly, but that doesn't mean your attitude needs to be serious the whole time. Commit to learning. You may have your own expectation and ideas on how your reopening will look, but as you've noticed, and I know various governments are different, the information's changing almost daily, at least weekly. The rules are changing at least weekly. And so commit to constantly learning. Get ideas from your team, get ideas from customers, listen in and be willing to try to take those things and implement, and have some shifting room available with the way you're reopening your business. So you're not just so dedicated to these expectations and these procedures you put in place that you have no room for movement. I can say on this learning, this is also a time that people on your team that have maybe been out of work and are now coming back in, or have been working remotely and are now interacting with each other again, it's going to be so rewarding for them if they can feel innovative and if they feel heard in how their ideas are being implemented. So really respect that too. It's something that your team needs and your customers need for their own psychology. And make space for that discomfort. Even the best plans are going to change right now. People are still on edge. You know, if each person is digging into their expectations and holding on tight to how this is going to look, you're going to have conflict for sure. There are other extra things that have people on edge in their personal life. So make sure you have space for discomfort where you're being compassionate about the extra things people are going through. But at the same time, it doesn't mean you're going to allow one customer or one member of your team to come in and railroad everybody else. You need to still have those conversations and set boundaries and be willing to have some of the uncomfortable conversations to hold that in place and make it a good experience for everybody. Another quick example, just that can come up, this is more on the team employee type situation, but it's that, say you have one person on your team that is usually like a winner. They're usually on time, meet deadlines, superior work. This is really like your ideal employee. But you've noticed now they're uncharacteristically distracted. Maybe they are showing up late or not getting on the e-meetings that they're supposed to be on, deadlines are missed, customer complaints, any of those kind of things that you're like, this person is not at the top of their game. Now you have other maybe customers complaining or other people on the team that are complaining, and you're like, oh gosh, I don't even know what they might be going through. You know, they may just be going through the regular, I use that in quotes, the regular pandemic stuff everybody else is facing. They could have something more specific. I don't know, you know, you can use your imagination of all the realms that people are suffering through this issue. But as a leader, you don't know. All you know is you see a reduce in performance. You know, first, you've got to make space for that discomfort. You do have to have a conversation of some sort. It doesn't have to be the super serious conversation, though. You know, it doesn't have to be a come in my office, shut the door, we've got to talk. It can be a light, caring, genuine, hey, what's going on? You know, how's this treating you? Are you having any special situations happening? And you don't just have to, you know, trick them into a corner. Say, I'm having this conversation with you because these are the things I'm noticing, or this is the feedback I'm getting. I'm not trying to come at you. I'm genuinely curious what's going on with you and how can I support you? That's a really genuine, nice conversation that doesn't have to be crazy serious. It can be almost more of a peer level conversation, offering to support that person versus, hey, your numbers are this, I'm getting this feedback, you know, shape up. That's not going to do anything for you. And in that, whatever you learn from that person, be willing to learn. Be willing to ask them, how can I support you to be most successful? Because for the most part, if this really is somebody that is normally a top performer, you don't want to let this short-term, hopefully shorter rather than longer-term situation affect their long-term role in your organization. They are valuable to you. Just take this opportunity to not be crazy serious, have a genuine conversation with them, and learn how you can support them, that they can be successful, they can feel happier and more fulfilled, and you can get what you need from that person. And that is all I have for you guys today. I hope it has been valuable and helpful on how you can lead your organization, both with a team and just be a leader in your organization for your customers.
Oh, I see that someone has a question. Closet at Gmail asks, what about having staff members that aren't performing at their best before this crisis? You spoke with them and are giving them a chance to be more successful, but with all that we project to happen after COVID, would you say it's safe to let go of such a person?
Oh my gosh, that is a really, really good question. Safe to let go is definitely a relative term. And I don't know, I don't know where you are geographically, because I know that if you're in the US, various states have different regulations and rules going on right now. If you're outside of the US, various countries and territories, the laws and the way each government is treating unemployment is different. So I kind of disclaim my answer with all of that aside. You definitely want to evaluate and just kind of weigh all of that out. I would say approach it delicately. I know a lot of organizations are putting a freeze on all hiring and firing, but I would say definitely take this time to have the conversations and document them. And make sure you're documenting that these conversations are pre-COVID. Have the conversation, and when you make the notes about it, usually if it's conversation 2 or 3, it actually needs to be a written, documented conversation where the other person signs off that whether they agree with you on or not on your conclusion, you did have this is the conversation that took place. And in that written document, it needs to say, we had this conversation November of 2019. We had this conversation October of 2019. We had it again February of 2020. Document that out. We've talked about these performance bases, these issues that we have, and also paper up the ways that the current circumstances have not changed how their performance would be evaluated. You could say, while I understand we have had pandemic issues and had to work to telecommuting and have had these other factors take place, these levels of performance should still be able to be hit. And then still give that timeline. In any final written write-up, I would say you do need to give a timeline and very specific steps for improvement. So now would be a good time to say, you have 30 days for improvement, and this is all written in that document. You have 30 days for improvement. The organization expects to see in very, very clear steps. So for example, you wouldn't say the organization expects to see more timely arrival. That's not measurable. It needs to say the organization needs to see no late arrivals. And even though that's kind of semantic, you want all of those goals to be measurable, so it's nobody's opinion whether or not they were reached. So I would say COVID or not COVID, you have a verbal conversation, you have a written documented conversation that spells out a timeline for improvement and specific measurable goals for improvement. And if at the end of that timeline, so say you give 30 days, which is standard and acceptable, you have not had those goals achieved, then I feel like you're safe to let go. But by safe to let go, that doesn't mean that you don't risk having to pay an unemployment claim. In most states in the US, it's at-will employment. And so in most states, minus a discrimination issue or legal issues, if it's strictly performance and you have documentation of performance issues, like I'm talking about, you can let them go and you wouldn't be sued. You wouldn't have legal liability, but you still, it's a big question mark on whether or not you could be liable for that unemployment claim. And especially right now, I would say that's a very real risk.
I hope that's a very safe answer. To be fair, that's a very safe answer, and that's
And I
making sure
don't
that
know
you.
if I put it on this. I don't know. I didn't introduce myself this way, but I do business consulting and leadership, but I am an attorney in Texas and Arizona in the U.S. So I do have that background knowledge as well.
Yes, that is very true. For those of you who probably missed the intro, Sarah is a small business expert helping entrepreneurs to scale their business in alignment with the life they love. She's also a business owner and an attorney by trade, and she's built seven-figure businesses through, and she's also been teaching business owners throughout most of her professional life. So she's definitely the person you want to ask these questions.
Yeah, yeah. So that question was kind of like right up my alley. But I also
Awesome.
give that worldly answer of it depends.
Yeah, perfect. All right, guys, if you have any more questions, we're going to go live on IG and you can ask all your questions and we'll talk a little bit more on the topics that really stood out to you guys. Thank you so much, Sarah, for taking the time just to share everything. And I mean, even if you aren't necessarily someone who's, like the top of the chain, if you're an entrepreneur and you're working with other people or freelancers, this, like the
Oh, for
tips
sure.
definitely
All of
still,
this applies with VAs. It applies
yeah.
with anybody 1099, any vendors and customers too, really.
Exactly. So we're going to move to IGTV. I hope you guys will join us. Thank you guys again for joining. And thank you so much, Sarah, for presenting. We enjoyed
All
it so
right,
much.
I'll jump over to IG and see you in a second.
All right.
Bye-bye.